Switzerland is not a member of the European Union. We are part of a different negotiation bloc here in the climate change process. We are heading the Environmental Integrity Group together with Korea, Mexico, Liechtenstein, Monaco. So we are having a small group, and therefore, of course, we're also having different positions than the EU. On many issues, we are quite similar, but not on all. Switzerland, for example, really wants to conclude the Kyoto Protocol here, but for us, the Kyoto Protocol is not something that is freestanding and without any context. So we would not be ready to sign here on a second commitment period if the context is not also progressing as well. This is the basic deal that we have done in Durban, and we stay with that deal. With regard to the Kyoto Protocol, for us, it's really important that we are able to solve these issues that will have most impact on the ambition for the second commitment period under Kyoto. And this is carryover and eligibility. If we are not able to solve these two issues in a meaningful manner, then we risk really to have a second commitment period with not much content. And that's an area where we differ also, for example, a little bit with the European Union, because we would like to have a very strict limitation of the carryover use in the second commitment period, and we would like to have a full cancellation of all the credits at the end of the second commitment period.
Right. I just wonder, with negotiation, obviously not being a member of the EU,
yes,
but Switzerland is obviously smack bang in the middle of Europe. I mean, in relation to climate change negotiations, does it put Switzerland in an awkward position? Would it be easier sometimes to be in the EU, or is it better? I mean, I guess Switzerland has a long tradition of not being part of the EU, so I guess you're kind of used to it by now. But climate change is something that transcends borders. So I just wondered, does that put Switzerland in an awkward position?
Our impression is, and my impression is, that not only climate change, but in all these international environmental negotiations, both Switzerland, the EU and the process is benefiting of having Switzerland not within the EU. The EU, the starting point is that the EU and Switzerland, of course, we share the basic common approaches and views and values, so on the basics we are quite similar. But there's one difference. While the EU is, of course, a heavyweight just because of its size and its members, a heavyweight also takes a little bit more time to develop new ideas, to feed in new ideas. The coordination process is much bigger than our coordination process. And that gives us really the very interesting role of being able to influence both the broader global process and the EU internal process by being able to be sometimes a little bit quicker with new ideas, also a little bit more flexible to react to certain positions. And we have also perhaps the possibility to be on certain issues a little bit more ambitious and a little bit more hard than the EU is, because we do not have to reflect all these different concerns as much as constraints as much as the EU. One example here, for example, in the lead up to Durban, Switzerland was much clear that for us the second commitment period is not a given, and that for us it had to be part of a package, and there the EU was not always sure how strong the EU was on this issue, for example. But that, I think it's really mutually supportive, because at a certain moment then you need the heavyweight of the EU. The EU has also much more expertise. It is a bigger institution, and therefore I think really both benefit from each other. One being the smaller, perhaps sometimes quicker, sometimes more ambitious, and more dynamic, and the other really being then the more heavy block that really is needed in order to make the deal at the end.
You kind of explain what Switzerland can give to the global negotiating process. What does Switzerland hope to get out of COP18 here in Doha?
Well, Switzerland would like to get three issues, and that's really linked to the three work streams on which we're working right now. We think, first of all, we have agreed to do so. We should conclude the Kyoto Protocol here, but we should do that in a meaningful manner. Meaningful manner does not mean that we are now able at once to increase our pledges out of the blue, but it means that we have to set the framework in a manner that the pledges really are what they say, so that, for example, for Switzerland, minus 20% means minus 20%, and that is not just accomplished through carryovers. And if we would increase later our pledge, then this would also mean that it is a real increase of the ambition, and we do not just increase our ambitions by using carryovers. So we should really make sure that we have a meaningful and an honest second commitment period. Then, with regard to the LCA, the Bali Action Plan, there we also think we should conclude it. We have really accomplished a lot. There we are very concerned that some countries now try to walk away from what we have agreed in Durban, that we are not trying to complement the already impressive achievements that we have, but that we try again to deal with everything, that we try to address everything, and this is not what should be done there, because this will not bring us to the end. We have done a lot under the Bali Action Plan. Some more things need to be done. We can advance and complement the package here in Doha, but then what we really have to make sure is that the institutions that we have set up are able to work. Let me use example financing. It's absolutely, it doesn't make sense now to try to address again financing within the LCA here in Doha. We have agreed on institutions on financing. We have set up the mechanics that these institutions are feeding back into the COP. The COP will have to deal with financing, and that's a place where we have now also to address that important issue. This is not, financing is not the issue that is tied only to the LCA, which will end here. Financing is a topic that will have to be treated and negotiated throughout the next years. That's the reason why we have to use the COP now as a forum to do that. So we think that will be difficult, but we have really to successfully conclude LCA here. And then on the third negotiation track on ADP, on the one side we think we should capture progress that we have achieved over the year with regard to the post-2020 regime, and we should capture progress not only through a chair summary but through a decision. And we would like to have a decision that is stressing on what has evolved over that year, what should be covered by the post-2020 regime, mitigation, ambition and support. But also the characteristics. I think the discussions have crystallized some characteristics that everybody is sharing, like that it should be dynamic, it should of course be applicable to all, so meaning really involving everybody, having mitigation commitments by all, that it should be differentiated, that it should be flexible, that it should build on the potential that each of us has while respecting also national circumstances. All these elements have been discussed, and there is an emerging consensus that they will be the characteristic of a future regime, so let's capture them in a COP decision. And with regard to the ambition work stream, we think we really have to establish here a process that will help us to increase our ambitions. Simply agreeing on a general text and on some more meetings is not sufficient. We need a process that is focusing on the themes, on the areas in a very specific manner that helps us to better understand the potential on each of these areas, and based on that then we need a political process that allows us to take the political decision to increase ambitions. So if we are not precise enough in the outcome with regard to the ambition work stream, then we are afraid that we are not having a framework that will help us to increase ambitions, and that's at the end the most important thing, that ambitions will increase.